Are there any other books, writers, thinkers, experiences that people might be able to look to themselves that have changed your experience of time or your ability to slow down?
I've been weirdly obsessed with time ever since I met this guy in a monastery in Massachusetts on my first vagabonding trip. I was like 23. This dude, wherever he is, thank you, whoever you are. He just left the Navy. He was in the contemplation room of a monastery. And I didn't want to become a Trappist monk, but it's like the only place where I could stay for free. And I was a dirtbag and I wanted to stay there. And I knew this guy, he was just out of the Navy. He wasn't necessarily going to become a monk, but he was really interested in monasticism. And he had this skull and crossbones on his arm. And that's where I learned the phrase memento mori. I had no idea what memento mori, remember death, is, the philosophical idea of remember death. And I've been thinking about it ever since. You know, actually, one of the inspirations for me as a traveler, you know, for vagabonding and up to the new book, is just the idea of that life doesn't necessarily reward you in time. My grandfather was a Kansas farmer. He worked really hard from the age 15. He dropped out of school, took over the farm when his dad died, worked his ass off. And then when he got to retirement age, his wife, my grandmother, got Alzheimer's disease and he took care of her for the rest of his life. And so that was a really heartbreaking thing when I was young. But I realized that that time isn't just given to you in a rational way in life. You have to grab time as you were allowed to grab it. And so, I mean, there's great writing about time. Is it Oliver Burkeman? I think you've quoted other people.
4,000 Weeks, I think.
4,000 Weeks, yeah. No, I haven't finished that book, but I always read like 10 books at once. But the philosophy of time and the idea of time and now the scent of time is something that I've always sort of obsessed about. And actually, one of my favorite filmmakers is Richard Linklater, and time is sort of one of the things he experiments in as a filmmaker. And, you know, I love Before Sunrise because it's about a guy who meets his true love, you know, on a train in Austria. Well, I met my wife the one time I wasn't traveling, but that's still a very meaningful movie to me because they talk so much about time in that trilogy, and they talk about journaling, you know, which is something I know you talk about quite a bit, but is not done as much anymore as it was in the 90s when that movie was first made. And just the idea that Celine, that character in Before Sunrise, is talking about coming to this city as a teenager and writing in her journal and basically having a conversation with herself based upon what she wrote in that journal. And Richard Linklater has some other, you know, their Boyhood is about very specifically about time and aging and things like that. But I think I saw Before Sunrise around the time that I left that monastery with the Navy guy with the tattoo who taught me about memento mori. And so I've thought about that. And I think it's really important to be cognizant of time and just the idea that the moment is what we have. And there's so many ways to embrace time, but maybe as an obsessive traveler, it's always puts me into this thought experiment of how time is playing out and how I'm making use of it.